Shadow's bark ripped through the midnight silence like a warning from God himself. Daniel Mercer hadn't heard that sound in 3 years. Not since Kandahar. Not since the night everything went wrong. His German shepherd was already at the fence, pawing at something in the darkness. Daniel ran. His flashlight found her first. A woman, maybe 30, collapsed in a pool of her own blood. Designer clothes shredded. Diamond bracelet still on her wrist. And when she opened her eyes, she whispered 4 words that would change everything. My stepmother sent them. A billionaire's daughter, a $4 billion inheritance, and killers already closing in. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story reaches. Please like, subscribe, and stay with me until the very end. This one will haunt you. Daniel Mercer hadn't spoken to another human being in 47 days. He kept count. Not because it mattered, but because counting was something his mind could do instead of remembering. 47 days since the delivery driver dropped supplies at the gate. 53 days since he'd driven into town for diesel. 91 days since he'd looked another person in the eye. Shadow didn't count as human, but Shadow was the only reason Daniel was still breathing. The German shepherd lay at his feet now, tan gold and black coat brushing against Daniel's boots. 8 years together, 4 combat deployments. Countless nights when Shadow's weight on the bed was the only thing that kept Daniel from eating his service pistol. Daniel was 40 years old, short dark brown hair going gray at the temples. He still wore his Navy working uniform most days, Type 3, digital camouflage in forest green and brown. He told himself it was practical. The truth was, he'd forgotten how to be anything other than what the Navy had made him. 20 years as a SEAL, 6 confirmed kills that he'd admit to, dozens more that lived in the spaces between his heartbeats. And now this. A ranch in Montana that his grandfather had left him. 200 acres of nothing. A house that creaked in the wind. A dog who understood him better than any human ever had. It was enough. It had to be enough. The satellite phone on the counter buzzed. Daniel ignored it. Only 3 people had that number, and none of them had anything he wanted to hear. It buzzed again. Shadow lifted his head, ears rotating toward the sound. It's nothing, boy. The phone stopped, then started again. Daniel crossed the room and checked the caller ID. Mark Jensen, his former commanding officer, the man who'd pulled him out of that hellhole in Syria when everyone else had written him off. He answered. What? Nice to hear your voice too, Danny. Mark's tone was light, but Daniel could hear something underneath. Tension. Worry. How are you holding up? Fine. That's not what your therapist says. Fired her. Danny, what do you want, Mark? A long pause. Daniel heard Mark take a breath, the kind that preceded bad news. There's chatter. Something coming out of Seattle. Private military contractors asking questions about you. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of questions? Location questions. Habit questions. The kind of questions people ask when they're building a target profile. I've been out for 3 years. Nobody cares about me anymore. Apparently somebody does. Mark's voice dropped. Danny, I don't know what this is, but my contacts are nervous. When my contacts get nervous, I get nervous. And when I get nervous about you, you call to warn me. I appreciate it. I'm not just warning you. I'm telling you to be careful. Watch your perimeter. Trust your instincts. A pause. And trust that dog of yours. He's smarter than both of us. Daniel looked at Shadow. The dog was already watching him. Those dark, intelligent eyes, reading his body language the way they'd been trained to. I always do. He hung up before Mark could say anything else. Shadow rose to his feet, sensing the shift in Daniel's mood. The dog moved to his side, pressing against his leg, the grounding technique they'd practiced 1,000 times. "Easy, boy. It's probably nothing." But Daniel's hands were already moving, checking the rifle by the door, confirming the pistol on his hip, scanning the windows out of habit so ingrained it felt like breathing. Probably nothing. Probably. The night came fast in Montana. One moment the sky was orange and pink, the next it was black and full of stars. Daniel sat on the porch with Shadow, watching the darkness settle over his land. He should have felt peace. That's what the therapists always said. Nature is healing. Solitude is restorative. Distance from triggers allows the nervous system to reset. They were wrong. The peace never came. The quiet just made room for the memories, and the memories never stopped. Tonight they were showing him Kandahar again. The village, the children, the moment when everything went sideways and he had to make choices that no training could prepare a man for. Shadow whined softly, pushing his muzzle against Daniel's palm. "I'm okay, boy. Just thinking." The dog didn't believe him. Shadow never believed him when he lied. Daniel forced himself to breathe. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique his last therapist had taught him before he'd stopped answering her calls. It didn't help. It never helped. But he kept doing it anyway, because the alternative was letting the darkness win. And Daniel Mercer had never lost a fight in his life. He wasn't about to start now. Midnight came and went. Daniel had just decided to go inside when Shadow's head snapped up. The dog's entire body went rigid. Ears forward, hackles rising, every muscle tensed. "What is it?" Shadow didn't answer. He was already moving, launching off the porch and sprinting toward the south fence line. Not the casual trot of a dog investigating a noise. This was full combat speed, the kind Daniel had only seen in the field. "Shadow, heel!" The dog ignored him completely. Daniel grabbed his rifle and flashlight and ran after him. His boots pounded the frozen ground, breath clouding in the cold air. Shadow was already at the fence, pawing at something, barking in a way Daniel hadn't heard in years. Not an alert bark, not a warning bark, a desperate bark. The sound of an animal that had found something terrible. Daniel's flashlight found it. A woman, collapsed against the fence post. Dark hair matted with blood and mud. Designer clothes torn and filthy. One arm stretched toward the ranch like she'd been reaching for salvation when her body finally gave out. And beneath her, spreading across the frozen ground, a pool of blood that was still steaming in the night air. "Jesus Christ!" Daniel dropped to his knees beside her. Combat medic training took over. Airway, breathing, circulation. She was breathing, barely. Pulse weak and thready. The blood was coming from a wound in her abdomen, a deep slash that had been crudely bandaged with what looked like a silk scarf. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered. Green eyes, he noticed, bright and terrified. "Please," her voice was barely a whisper. "Please don't let them find me." "Who? Who's looking for you?" "My stepmother." She coughed, and blood flecked her lips. "She sent them to finish what the river didn't." Daniel didn't understand, but he didn't need to. Right now, the only thing that mattered was keeping her alive. "I'm going to pick you up. It's going to hurt, but I have to get you inside." She nodded weakly. Daniel lifted her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing. Dehydration, blood loss, maybe days without food. Shadow circled them both as they moved toward the house, the dog's eyes scanning the darkness with professional paranoia. Good boy, Daniel thought. Watch our 6. Inside, he laid her on the kitchen table, the cleanest surface he had. His medical kit was in the closet, stocked with supplies he'd hoped he'd never need. "I'm going to look at your wound. I need to see how bad it is." She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't call anyone, please. They have people everywhere. Police, hospitals, everywhere." "Lady, you're bleeding out on my table. If I don't get you help—" "If you call for help, I'm dead anyway." Her eyes locked onto his, fierce despite the pain. "Please, I know how this sounds, but I'm telling you the truth." Daniel studied her face. 20 years of reading people in life-or-death situations had given him a sense for liars. This woman wasn't lying. She was terrified, desperate, and completely convinced of what she was saying. "Fine, no calls. But I'm going to need you to trust me. I've patched up worse than this in places a lot less comfortable than my kitchen." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Military? Maybe SEAL. 20 years. Then I'm in good hands." Daniel worked quickly. The wound was bad but survivable. A knife slash that had gone deep but missed the major organs. Whoever had done this had wanted her to die slowly, painfully. They'd wanted her to suffer. The thought made something cold settle in Daniel's chest. This is going to sting. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic. She bit down on a leather strap he'd given her, her whole body shaking with the effort of staying silent. "You're doing good. Stay with me." He stitched the wound closed with the precision of a man who'd done this too many times before. Battlefield surgery, the kind of medicine they didn't teach in schools. By the time he finished, she was barely conscious. "What's your name?" he asked. "Victoria." A pause. "Victoria Chen." Daniel's hands went still. Victoria Chen. He knew that name. Everyone knew that name. Raymond Chen's daughter, the tech billionaire who'd died 3 months ago, leaving behind a fortune that newspapers said was worth nearly $5 billion. The Raymond Chen? Chen Global Industries? Victoria's eyes found his. "You know who I am. I know who your father was. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be. He was a good man. The best man." Her voice cracked. "And my stepmother murdered him." Daniel pulled a chair close and sat down. Shadow positioned himself at Victoria's side, his head resting near her hand, as if he understood she needed comfort. "Tell me everything." The story came out in fragments, interrupted by pain and exhaustion. Raymond Chen had been a visionary, a self-made billionaire who'd built his empire from nothing. After Victoria's mother died when she was 12, he'd raised her alone. They'd been inseparable. Then Margaret appeared. "She was perfect," Victoria said bitterly. "Beautiful, charming, 20 years younger than my father." She came into his life during his first cancer treatment, played the devoted caretaker, became indispensable. And then she married him. I was suspicious, but my father was lonely. He'd been alone for so long, and Margaret made him happy. Victoria's hands clenched. "I didn't know she was poisoning him." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. Poisoning. Slowly, over months, small doses that mimicked his cancer symptoms. The doctors thought he was getting worse. They increased his medications, changed his treatments. Nothing worked. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. Because the cancer wasn't killing him. She was. "How did you find out?" "After he died, I started going through his medical records. I'm not a doctor, but something felt wrong. The timeline didn't match. His symptoms appeared in patterns that didn't correlate with his treatment schedule." She paused. "I hired a private investigator. He found prescriptions Margaret had filled under fake names. Arsenic compounds. The same ones that were in my father's system. Daniel processed this. A murdered billionaire. A poisoning wife. And now, a daughter with evidence being hunted through the Montana wilderness. You took this to the authorities?" "I tried," Victoria laughed bitterly. That's when I discovered how deep Margaret's connections go. Her new husband is William Ashford, chief of police in Seattle. He's the one who cut my brake lines. The accident. Garrison Bridge. My car went through the guardrail and into the river. I was supposed to drown. The current was supposed to carry my body miles downstream. Her voice steadied. But I didn't drown. I swam to shore, and I've been running ever since. How long? 8 days. Daniel stared at her. 8 days. 8 days of running through wilderness with a knife wound, no supplies, and killers on her trail. How are you still alive? I don't know. Victoria's eyes met his. Maybe God. Maybe luck. Maybe I just wasn't ready to let Margaret win. Shadow's head lifted suddenly. His ears swiveled toward the window, body tensing. Daniel was on his feet instantly. What is it, boy? The dog moved to the door, a low growl building in his chest. Daniel killed the lights. In the darkness, he moved to the window and peered through the curtains. Headlights. 2 sets, moving slowly up the mountain road. Still distant, maybe half a mile, but coming closer. They found me. Victoria's voice was flat with despair. I led them right to you. How would they track you? I don't know. Thermal imaging? Dogs? Satellite? She struggled to sit up. It doesn't matter. You have to let me go. I'll lead them away. Stop. Daniel's voice was calm but absolute. You're not going anywhere. You don't understand. Margaret has unlimited resources. Private military contractors. Former special operations. They won't stop until I'm dead. Then we'll give them a reason to stop. Daniel moved through the house with practiced efficiency. Rifle, pistol, extra magazines. The tactical vest he hadn't worn in 3 years. His hands remembered everything his mind had tried to forget. You're one man. Victoria watched him with a mixture of hope and horror. Against how many? I've been one man against worse odds. He checked the rifle's action. Stay here. Stay down. If you hear me whistle 3 times, that means get to the root cellar. There's a tunnel that leads out to the creek. What are you going to do? Daniel looked at Shadow. The dog met his eyes with that steady, unwavering trust. What I was trained to do. He slipped out the back door before Victoria could argue. The night swallowed him like it always had. Like it had in Kandahar, in Fallujah, in a dozen other places where darkness meant survival. Shadow moved beside him, a silent ghost. The dog knew this dance. They'd performed it together more times than Daniel could count. The vehicles had stopped. Daniel watched through his scope as men emerged. 4 of them, maybe 5. Tactical gear, military movements, not amateurs. One of them was speaking into a radio. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Coordinating, planning, getting ready to move. He had maybe 5 minutes before they reached the house. 5 minutes to figure out how to stop them. Daniel melted back into the darkness, Shadow at his heels. His mind was already working, analyzing terrain, calculating angles, remembering every lesson 20 years of warfare had taught him. Victoria Chen had brought death to his doorstep, but death had been Daniel Mercer's profession for 2 decades, and tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he was going to practice his craft. The first man reached the perimeter fence and stopped. He was scanning the property with night vision goggles, weapon raised, every movement textbook professional. Daniel waited. Patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. Not the rifle, not the training. Patience. A second man joined the first. They communicated with hand signals, military standard. These weren't street criminals. These were operators. Good, Daniel thought. That makes it fair. He moved to position, Shadow following like a shadow of a shadow. The dog knew to stay silent, to wait for the signal. The third man was circling the house from the east. The fourth had positioned himself on the ridge, probably a sniper providing overwatch. 4 visible targets. Unknown additional support. Daniel had faced worse. He sighted the sniper first. The man thought he was invisible, but Daniel had been finding invisible men in darkness for 20 years. One shot would alert everyone. One shot would turn this into a firefight. Daniel wasn't ready for a firefight. Not yet. Instead, he moved closer. Shadow ghosted beside him, belly low, paws silent on the frozen ground. They reached the ridge without making a sound. The sniper never saw him coming. Daniel's arm wrapped around his throat, cutting off air, cutting off sound. The man struggled for 8 seconds before going limp. Not dead, unconscious. Daniel didn't kill unless he had to. But he had to get information. When the sniper woke, he found himself zip-tied to a tree, Daniel's pistol pressed against his forehead. "How many?" Daniel's voice was ice. "Screw you!" Daniel moved the pistol to the man's knee. "I'll ask once more. How many?" The man's bravado cracked. 6. 6 total. Harris is running point. 2 more on the north approach. "Who sent you?" "I don't know her name, just—" He swallowed hard. "They call her the Widow. She's the money. Ashford's the contact." The Widow. Margaret Chen. "What are your orders?" "Retrieve the target alive, if possible. If not—" He didn't finish. "If not, what?" "Leave no witnesses." The man's eyes flickered toward the ranch house. "Including whoever's helping her." Daniel felt something shift inside him. The cold calculation of the operator giving way to something hotter, something more human. Anger. "You picked the wrong house," Daniel said quietly. "You don't understand, man. These people don't stop. They have resources you can't imagine. Money. Power. They'll burn your whole world down to—" Daniel knocked him unconscious with a single strike. He had 5 men left to deal with. 5 professionals who thought they were hunting a wounded woman. They didn't know they'd wandered into a SEAL's territory. Daniel whistled once, low and sharp. Shadow appeared from the darkness, teeth bared, ready for war. "Time to go to work, boy." The dog's eyes gleamed in the starlight. Together, they moved toward the house, and somewhere in the darkness, 5 men who thought they were predators were about to learn what it felt like to become prey. Daniel moved through darkness like he was born in it. 20 years of training had turned night into his natural habitat, and Shadow was an extension of his own senses. The dog's ears catching sounds Daniel couldn't hear, his nose tracking scents Daniel couldn't smell. 2 men were approaching the house from the north. Daniel could see them through the trees, moving in standard 2-man formation. Cover and advance. Textbook military. Textbook was predictable. He circled wide, staying downwind, staying silent. Shadow matched his pace, body low, paws falling soft on frozen ground. The first man passed within 10 feet without seeing them. Daniel let him go. The second man was the target, the one providing rear cover, the one whose disappearance would take longer to notice. He struck from behind, one arm around the throat, the other controlling the weapon. The man was strong, well-trained, but Daniel had been doing this since before he could legally drink. 8 seconds. The man went limp. Daniel lowered him to the ground and took his radio. Static crackled. Then a voice. "Briggs, status." Daniel keyed the mic. "Clear," he whispered, mimicking the unconscious man's tone. "Copy. Converge on primary structure. Harris wants this done fast." Daniel smiled without humor. Harris was about to learn that fast wasn't always possible. He moved toward the house, shadow at his heels. The remaining 3 men were closing in, 2 from the south, 1 circling to the back door. Coordinated assault, professional timing. But they were assaulting an empty position. Daniel had already moved Victoria. The root cellar beneath the kitchen had been built by his grandfather during the Cold War, a concrete bunker designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. Victoria was down there now, hidden behind a false wall that looked like solid concrete. The men would find an empty house, and while they searched, Daniel would pick them apart. The first shot came from the south. One of the attackers had spotted Shadow and fired on instinct. Big mistake. Daniel put 2 rounds through the shooter's vest, center mass. The man went down hard, gasping for breath. Body armor had saved his life, but he was out of the fight. "Contact! Contact south!" someone shouted. The coordinated assault became chaos. Men scrambling for cover, firing at shadows, unable to identify their target. Daniel dropped another one with a shot to the knee. Non-lethal, but incapacitating. The man screamed as he fell. "Where is he? Where the hell is he?" A voice cut through the radio chatter. Calm. Controlled. "All units, fall back to vehicles. Regroup. He's got training. This isn't a civilian." Harris, the team leader. Daniel let them go. He'd made his point. But as the surviving men retreated, dragging their wounded, he knew this was just the opening round. They'd be back, with more men, more firepower, more preparation. He had hours, maybe less, to figure out a way to survive what was coming. Victoria was shaking when he pulled her from the root cellar. Not from cold, from fear, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming reality of everything that had happened. "They're gone?" For now. Daniel helped her back to the kitchen, set her in a chair. "They'll regroup, come back with reinforcements." "Then we have to run. We have to—" "We're not running." Daniel's voice was flat. Running is what they expect. Running is where they have the advantage. "So what? We just wait here for them to come back and kill us?" "We prepare." He pulled out a map of the property, spreading it on the table. "This ranch has been in my family for 4 generations. My grandfather built it to be defensible. Hidden caches, escape routes, choke points. They think they're assaulting a cabin. They're assaulting a fortress." Victoria stared at him. "Who are you?" "I told you, Navy SEAL." "No, I mean," she struggled for words. "You took out 4 men in 10 minutes. You're not scared. You're not even breathing hard." Daniel met her eyes. "I'm terrified. The difference is, I've been terrified before. I know how to work through it." Shadow patted over and rested his head on Victoria's knee. The gesture was so human, so compassionate, that Victoria's composure finally cracked. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I'm not trained for this. I went to Stanford. I run a charity foundation. I don't know how to fight." "You don't have to fight. You have to survive." Daniel crouched beside her. "Can you do that? Can you stay alive long enough for me to end this?" "How are you going to end it? You said yourself, they'll come back with more men." "Then I'll need more than guns." Daniel stood. "Tell me about Margaret. Everything you know. Weaknesses, habits, fears. There's always a pressure point." Victoria wiped her eyes. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "Margaret is brilliant. Ruthless. She planned my father's death for 2 years before she started poisoning him. She cultivated relationships with politicians, police chiefs, judges. By the time my father died, she had an entire network ready to protect her. But she didn't plan on you surviving." "No, I was supposed to die in that car." Victoria's jaw tightened. "She made one mistake." "What?" She underestimated how much I loved my father, how far I'd go to make her pay for what she did. Daniel nodded slowly. The evidence you mentioned, the prescriptions, the medical records. Where is it? Hidden. A safety deposit box in Helena. I have the key. On you? Victoria reached into her bra and pulled out a small metal key. I sewed it in before everything went wrong. I knew if they caught me, they'd take everything else. Daniel took the key, examined it. Standard safety deposit design. He'd seen hundreds like it. This is our leverage. If we can get this evidence to the right people— There are no right people. Victoria's voice was bitter. I tried the FBI. Margaret's lawyers got to them first. I tried journalists. 2 of them died in accidents before they could publish. She has reach everywhere. Not everywhere. Daniel pulled out his satellite phone. I know someone. Former commanding officer. He has contacts outside normal channels. People who investigate corruption that regular agencies won't touch. You trust him? With my life. I have trusted him with my life. Daniel started dialing. If anyone can get this evidence to people Margaret can't buy, it's him. The phone connected. Mark Jensen answered on the second ring. Danny, I was just about to call you. We intercepted chatter. There's a team heading your way. Private contractors, heavily armed. You need to— They already came. I sent them home with fewer men than they started with. Silence. Then— How many? 6. 4 down, 2 running. But they'll be back. Danny, what the hell is going on up there? Daniel looked at Victoria. I found something they want. Someone. And I'm not giving her up. He explained the situation quickly. Victoria Chen, the murdered billionaire, the evidence of poisoning, the police chief husband, the private army hunting them. When he finished, Mark let out a long breath. This is way above your pay grade, Danny. Way above mine, too. I know, but I need options. People who can't be bought or threatened. There's a woman, federal prosecutor, Southern District of New York. Her name is Catherine Wells. She's been building corruption cases for 15 years, and she's never been compromised. A pause. She's also the reason 3 sitting congressmen are in prison. Can you reach her? I can try. But Danny, even if she takes the case, it'll take time. Days, maybe weeks. Can you hold out that long? Daniel looked at the map of his property. At Shadow, alert and watchful. At Victoria, wounded but determined. I'll hold out as long as I have to. Then I'll make the call. Stay alive, Danny. That's an order. The line went dead. Victoria was watching him with something new in her eyes. Not just fear anymore. Something like hope. You really think we can do this? Take on Margaret with her billions and her armies? I think we don't have a choice. Daniel tucked the phone away. But right now, we need to focus on surviving the night. They'll hit us again before dawn. How do you know? Because it's what I would do. Strike while the target is tired, disoriented, before reinforcements can arrive. He moved to the window, scanning the darkness. We have maybe 4 hours. Let's not waste them. They worked through the night. Daniel showed Victoria the hidden passages his grandfather had built, the weapons caches scattered around the property, the escape routes that led to the creek and beyond. She learned fast. Faster than he expected. You're good at this, he said, watching her memorize the layout of the root cellar. I'm motivated. Her voice was grim. Amazing what survival does for focus. Most people freeze. You're not freezing. I froze in the river. Victoria's eyes went distant. When the car went in, the water was so cold, so dark. I couldn't tell which way was up. I thought, this is it. This is how I die. But you didn't. I remembered something my father told me when I was little. He said, when everything goes wrong, don't think about everything. Think about the next step. Just the next step. The rest will follow. She blinked, coming back to the present. So I stopped thinking about drowning. I started thinking about the surface, just the surface. And somehow, I found it. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Respect. Admiration. This woman had been through hell and kept walking. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was the best man I ever knew. Victoria's voice cracked. And Margaret took him from me. Slowly. Painfully. She made his last month's agony, and she did it with a smile on her face. We'll make her pay. You don't have to do this. Victoria turned to face him. You could disappear. Let them have me. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when Shadow found you at my fence. Daniel met her eyes. I spent 20 years protecting strangers in countries I couldn't find on a map. You think I'm going to stop now? Why? Why do you care? The question hung in the air. Daniel didn't have an easy answer. He barely knew this woman. She'd brought death to his doorstep, shattered the fragile peace he'd built. But when he looked at her, he didn't see a billionaire's daughter. He saw someone alone, someone hunted, someone who needed help. He saw himself 3 years ago, when the war finally caught up with him, and he thought there was no way out. Because everyone deserves someone in their corner, he said quietly. And right now, I'm all you've got. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, nodded once. Then let's get ready. They'll be coming soon. Shadow lifted his head suddenly, ears forward, body tense. Daniel's hand found his rifle. They're early, he muttered. Through the window, he could see them. More vehicles this time. 4, maybe 5. Headlights cutting through the darkness like predator eyes. They were done playing cautious. Root cellar, Daniel ordered. Now. I can help. You can survive. That's your job. He pressed his backup pistol into her hands. If they get past me, go through the tunnel. Don't stop until you reach the highway. Daniel, go! Victoria ran. Shadow hesitated, looking between Daniel and the door. Stay with her, boy. Protect her. The dog whined once, then followed Victoria into the darkness. Daniel was alone. He checked his rifle, checked his pistol, checked the grenades he'd pulled from his grandfather's cache, old but functional. 6 men last time, probably double that now, maybe more. He'd faced worse odds in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in a dozen places whose names he'd never be allowed to speak. But he'd always had a team then, brothers who'd die for him, and he'd die for them. Now it was just him. Just him and 20 years of training against an army. Daniel smiled without humor. He'd missed this. God help him, he'd missed this. The first vehicle stopped 200 yards out. Men poured from the doors, taking positions, setting up a perimeter. A voice echoed through a bullhorn. Daniel Mercer, this is William Ashford, Chief of Police. You're harboring a fugitive wanted for questioning in a federal investigation. Surrender the woman and yourself, and no one else has to get hurt. Federal investigation. Daniel almost laughed. They were playing the legal angle now, trying to make this look legitimate. Come out with your hands up. This is your only warning. Daniel keyed the radio he'd taken from the unconscious sniper. Chief Ashford, I know who you are. I know what you did. And I have evidence that will put you and your wife in prison for the rest of your lives. Silence. Then Ashford's voice, stripped of its official pretense. You're making a mistake, Mercer. You don't know who you're dealing with. Neither do you. Daniel killed the radio and moved to his first position. The house was already lost. Too many angles, too many entry points. But his grandfather's property had other defenses. The barn sat 200 yards from the house, connected by a covered walkway. Inside were weapons, supplies, and something Ashford's men didn't know about. A way out. Daniel slipped through the darkness, staying low, moving fast. Behind him, he heard the assault begin. Flashbangs, breaking glass, shouted commands. They were breaching the house. Finding it empty. Good. That would buy him time. He reached the barn and pulled open the hidden hatch in the floor. Below was a tunnel, another of his grandfather's paranoid preparations, that ran under the property and emerged near the creek. The same creek where Victoria was waiting. But Daniel wasn't running. Not yet. He moved to the barn's upper level, where his grandfather had built a sniper's nest with clear sight lines to the house. He settled into position, rifle steady, breathing calm. The first man emerged from the house, signaling all clear. Daniel put a round 3 inches from his head, deliberately missing. "Next one doesn't miss," he shouted. "Pull back, or I start aiming for real." Chaos erupted below. Men diving for cover, searching for the shooter, unable to find him in the darkness. "He's in the barn," someone yelled. "I've got no shot. The angle's wrong." Daniel smiled. His grandfather had been paranoid, but paranoia bred excellent architecture. Another voice cut through the confusion. Not Ashford this time. Someone else. Female. "Mr. Mercer." He found her through his scope. Tall, elegant, designer coat, blonde hair perfectly styled despite the cold. She was standing beside one of the vehicles, completely exposed, like she knew he wouldn't shoot. Margaret Chen. "I'm going to make this simple," she called out. "You have something I want. I have something you want." She gestured, and 2 men dragged a figure from the back of an SUV. Daniel's blood went cold. It was a young man, early 20s, beaten badly, hands bound, a bag over his head. "This is Kevin Mercer," Margaret continued. "Your nephew, your brother's son. Lovely boy. Works at that coffee shop in Billings. He was very surprised when my men picked him up this morning." No. Daniel hadn't seen Kevin in 3 years, hadn't spoken to his brother in 5. But blood was blood, and this woman had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. "Bring me Victoria Chen in the next 5 minutes," Margaret said, "or young Kevin here loses something he'll miss. I'm thinking fingers first, then eyes." She pulled the bag off Kevin's head. The boy was crying, terrified, looking around wildly for help that wasn't coming. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. He had the shot. He could drop Margaret right now, end this with a single bullet. But her men would kill Kevin before his body hit the ground. 4 minutes, Mr. Mercer." Daniel lowered his rifle and made the hardest decision of his life. He keyed his radio and called Shadow. "Bring her up. Now." Victoria's voice crackled through the radio. "Daniel, what's happening? I heard you call Shadow." "Change of plans. They have Kevin, my nephew." Silence. Then, "Oh, God." "I need you to come up. Walk out the front door with your hands visible." "Daniel, no! If I surrender, they'll kill us both. They'll kill everyone." "I'm not surrendering." Daniel's voice was ice. "I'm buying time. When I give the signal, you run. Back through the tunnel, to the creek, and don't stop." "What about you? What about Kevin?" "I'll handle it." "How?" Daniel didn't answer. He was already moving, calculating angles, running scenarios through his mind. 20 years of combat had taught him one thing above all else. The best plans were the ones you made up as you went along. 2 minutes, Mr. Mercer!" Margaret's voice echoed across the property. Victoria emerged from the tunnel entrance behind the barn. Shadow was at her side, hackles raised, teeth bared at the distant figures. "I'm not leaving you here to die," Victoria said when she reached him. "You don't have a choice." "There's always a choice." She grabbed his arm. My father taught me that. There's always another way. Your father wasn't facing 12 armed men with his nephew's life on the line. No, but he faced worse. He built an empire from nothing. He survived cancer. He survived Margaret for 3 years. Victoria's eyes blazed. He never gave up. Neither do I. Daniel stared at her. This woman who should have been broken, who should have been begging him to save her at any cost. Instead, she was standing beside him, ready to fight. "You're insane," he said. "Probably. Got a better plan?" "1 minute!" Margaret screamed. Daniel made his decision. "There's a rifle in the barn loft. Scoped, zeroed at 200 yards. You know how to shoot? My father made me learn when I was 16. Said a woman should know how to protect herself. Then get up there. When I move on Margaret, you take out anyone who goes for Kevin." Victoria nodded once and ran for the barn ladder. Daniel stepped out into the open. "I'm coming out!" he shouted. "Don't hurt the boy!" Margaret's smile was visible even from this distance. The smile of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. "Wise decision, Mr. Mercer. Walk slowly. Hands where I can see them." Daniel walked. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. He counted the men, 12 visible, probably more hidden. Ashford stood near Kevin, pistol drawn. Margaret remained by the SUV, untouchable. Almost untouchable. "Where's Victoria?" Margaret demanded when he was 50 yards out. "Coming. She's injured, moves slow." "Then tell her to move faster." "She's coming." 40 yards. 30. Daniel could see Kevin's face now, pale, terrified, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. The boy had never hurt anyone in his life. He made coffee for a living. And now he was a pawn in a game he didn't even understand. "That's close enough." Margaret held up her hand. "Where is she, Mercer?" "I told you. She's coming." "I don't see her." "Look harder." Margaret's eyes narrowed. She gestured to one of her men. "Go check the barn." The man started forward. He made it 3 steps before his head snapped back and he crumpled to the ground. Victoria's shot echoed across the property. Everything happened at once. Daniel lunged for the nearest guard, driving his elbow into the man's throat before he could raise his weapon. He grabbed the falling rifle and opened fire, dropping 2 more men in rapid succession. Margaret screamed orders. Her remaining guards scattered, searching for cover, searching for the sniper they couldn't see. Ashford reacted fastest. He grabbed Kevin and pressed his pistol to the boy's head. "Stop! Everyone stop, or I blow his brains out!" Daniel froze. Victoria's fire went silent. Ashford was breathing hard, eyes wild. "Drop the weapon, Mercer. Right now." "Don't do this, Ashford. It's over. Your boss is exposed." "It's not over until I say it's over." Ashford's finger tightened on the trigger. "The weapon. Now." Daniel lowered the rifle slowly, placed it on the ground. "Good. Now kick it away." He kicked it. Margaret recovered her composure, straightening her coat like this was a minor inconvenience. "Impressive, Mr. Mercer. I see your reputation is well earned." She gestured to her remaining men. "Find the woman. Bring her to me alive." "Margaret," Daniel's voice stopped her cold. "Let the boy go. He has nothing to do with this." "He has everything to do with this. He's my insurance policy." Margaret stepped closer, studying Daniel with clinical interest. "You know what I've learned in my life, Mr. Mercer? Everyone has a weakness, a pressure point, something they care about more than themselves. For Victoria, it was her father. For you," she glanced at Kevin, "family." "He's innocent." "Innocent," Margaret laughed. "There's no such thing. Everyone is guilty of something. Everyone has a price." "What's yours?" The question surprised her. Excuse me? Your price. What would it take to make you walk away from all of this? Margaret's smile returned, but it was different now. Colder. There is no price. There's only winning. Your father was a soldier, wasn't he, Mr. Mercer? He should have taught you. In war, you don't negotiate. You destroy. Gunfire erupted from the barn. Victoria was pinned down, at least 3 men closing on her position. "Shadow!" Daniel shouted. The German shepherd burst from behind a vehicle where he'd been hiding. 70 pounds of fur and fury slammed into the nearest guard, teeth finding the man's gun arm. The scream was inhuman. Daniel moved. He covered the distance to Ashford in 3 strides, grabbed the police chief's gun hand, and twisted. The weapon discharged into the ground. Daniel drove his forehead into Ashford's nose. Bone crunched, blood sprayed. Kevin stumbled free, gasping, crying, alive. "Run!" Daniel shoved him toward the tree line. "Run and don't stop!" The boy ran. Ashford was on the ground, clutching his shattered face, screaming curses. Daniel grabbed his fallen pistol and spun toward Margaret. She was gone. One of the SUVs was peeling away, tires throwing gravel. Margaret in the back seat, face twisted with fury. Daniel raised the pistol, sighted on the tires. A bullet tore through his shoulder before he could fire. The impact spun him around. He hit the ground hard, the world going white with pain. Somewhere distant, he heard Shadow barking, Victoria screaming his name. Then Boots appeared in his vision, a rifle barrel pressed against his forehead. "Stay down, SEAL." The voice was cold, professional. "It's over." Daniel looked up. The man standing over him was different from the others. Older, harder, with the eyes of someone who'd seen real combat. "Harris," Daniel guessed. "That's right, and you just made my job very complicated." Harris glanced toward the fleeing SUV. "Mrs. Chen is going to be extremely unhappy." "Good," Harris almost smiled. "You've got balls, I'll give you that. But balls don't stop bullets." He pressed the rifle harder against Daniel's skull. "Any last words?" Daniel thought about his father, his grandfather, the ranch that had been in his family for 4 generations. He thought about Shadow, about Victoria, about all the things he'd never said to the people he cared about. Then he thought about Kevin, running through the trees toward safety. At least the boy would make it. At least one innocent person would survive this night. "Yeah," Daniel said. "Duck." Harris frowned. "What?" The barn exploded. Not literally, but close enough. Victoria had found his grandfather's weapons cache. The flashbang grenade she threw created a wall of light and sound that sent everyone staggering. Harris recoiled, momentarily blinded. Daniel moved on pure instinct. He grabbed the rifle barrel, yanked it aside, drove his good fist into Harris's throat. The man gagged, stumbled. Daniel ripped the weapon away and slammed the stock into his temple. Harris dropped. Shadow was at Daniel's side instantly, pressing against his wounded shoulder, whining with concern. "I'm okay, boy. I'm okay." He wasn't okay. The bullet had gone through clean, but he was losing blood fast. His left arm was useless. His vision swam. Victoria ran toward him from the barn, rifle in hand. "Daniel!" "I'm hit. Shoulder. Through and through." "We need to stop the bleeding." "Later. Right now we need to move." He struggled to his feet, Shadow supporting him. "Margaret got away. She'll call in more men." "Then we follow her." "Victoria!" "No." Her voice was steel. "She killed my father. She tried to kill me. She almost killed you and your nephew. This ends tonight." Daniel looked at her. This woman he'd known for less than 12 hours, who'd been buried and beaten and hunted and refused to break. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Daniel nodded slowly. Then let's finish this. They moved through the darkness, following the SUV's tracks. Daniel's shoulders screamed with every step, but he'd fought through worse pain. Shadow ranged ahead, nose to the ground, tracking the vehicle's scent.
"She'll head for the highway," Victoria said. "There's a private airfield 30 miles south. She keeps a plane there."
"How do you know?"
"I made it my business to know everything about her. Every property, every asset, every escape route."
Victoria's jaw tightened.
"I've been planning this confrontation for months. I just never thought it would happen like this."
They reached Daniel's truck, untouched by Margaret's men, parked behind the barn where they hadn't thought to look.
"Can you drive?" Victoria asked.
"Can you shoot while I drive?"
"Guess we'll find out."
Daniel climbed behind the wheel, fighting through waves of dizziness. Victoria took the passenger seat with the rifle across her lap. Shadow jumped into the back, alert and ready. The engine roared to life. They tore down the mountain road, headlights cutting through darkness. Daniel pushed the truck to its limits, taking curves at dangerous speeds, ignoring the pain that made his vision blur.
"There," Victoria pointed. "Taillights. That's her."
The SUV was maybe half a mile ahead, moving fast, but not fast enough. Daniel closed the distance, foot heavy on the accelerator. Margaret's driver must have spotted them. The SUV swerved, trying to put obstacles between them. But Daniel knew these roads. He'd driven them for 3 years, memorized every curve and straightaway. "She's heading for Carter's Ridge," he said. "The road narrows there. 1 lane, steep drop on both sides."
"Can you cut her off?" "I can try." He pushed harder. The truck's engine screamed. The gap closed. 400 yards, 300, 200. They were almost on top of her when the SUV suddenly braked and spun sideways, blocking the road. Daniel slammed his own brakes. The truck skidded, stopped 20 feet from the SUV. Margaret stepped out. She was holding something in her hand. A phone, Daniel realized. And she was smiling. "I wondered if you'd follow." Her voice carried clearly in the night air. "You're predictable, Mr. Mercer. All soldiers are. You see an enemy retreat, you pursue. It's instinct." Daniel kept his hands on the wheel. "What do you want, Margaret?" "I want what I've always wanted. The money, the power, the life I earned by suffering through 3 years of marriage to a dying old man." Her smile widened. "But right now, specifically, I want you to watch." She held up the phone, pressed a button. Daniel's blood went cold. "I have people everywhere, Mr. Mercer. Did you think your nephew was my only insurance?" Margaret's eyes gleamed. "Right now there's a man outside your brother's house in Billings, another outside the apartment of your old commanding officer, a third watching the home of the prosecutor Mark Jensen was trying to contact." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" She turned the phone to show the screen. A live video feed. A house. A car parked outside. A shadow moving in the window. "This is your brother's home. Thomas Mercer, age 45. Wife, Sarah. Daughter, Emily, age 8. Victoria grabbed Daniel's arm. "She's not bluffing." "No, I'm not." Margaret lowered the phone. "Here's what's going to happen. Victoria is going to get out of that truck. She's going to walk over here. She's going to get in my car. And then we're going to drive away. And my family? We'll be fine. As long as you don't follow. As long as you never speak of this again. As long as Victoria's evidence disappears forever." Margaret's smile never wavered. "It's a simple trade, Mr. Mercer. One life for many." Daniel's mind raced. There had to be another way. There was always another way. But he couldn't see it. Margaret had outplayed him. She'd planned for every contingency, anticipated every move. "Don't do it." Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "She'll kill them anyway. She doesn't leave witnesses." "She's right," Margaret shrugged. "But I'll make it quick, painless. A car accident here, a gas leak there. Tragic, but natural. Unless you force me to be creative."
Daniel looked at Victoria, at Shadow, at the darkness surrounding them. He thought about his brother, the man he hadn't spoken to in 5 years, because the words between them had grown too heavy. The niece he'd never met, because he couldn't face what he'd become. He thought about Mark Jensen, the officer who'd saved his life twice and never asked for anything in return. He thought about Victoria, the woman who'd fought through hell to get justice for her father, the woman who deserved better than this. Okay. The word tasted like ashes. Daniel, no! I said okay! His shout echoed off the mountainside. Victoria gets out. You let my family go. Margaret's smile became a grin. Wise choice. Victoria grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. She's lying. The moment I'm in that car, everyone dies. Your family, you, me. She can't afford witnesses. What choice do I have? You fight. You always fight. That's what you told me. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. Don't give up now. Not when we're this close. I can't let them die. Not for me. Not for me? Victoria's voice cracked. Then let me make the choice. Let me decide what my life is worth. Victoria, my father died because I wasn't strong enough to see what Margaret was doing. My partner died because I trusted the wrong people. She wiped her eyes. I won't let anyone else die for me. Not your family. Not you. She opened the truck door. Wait. Daniel grabbed her arm. There's something you should know. What? He pulled her close, whispered in her ear. 3 words. Just 3 words. Victoria's eyes widened. Then she smiled, a real smile, fierce and bright. You're insane, she whispered back. Probably, but it might work. She squeezed his hand once. Then she stepped out of the truck and walked toward Margaret Chen. Shadow whined, confused, looking between Daniel and the woman walking away. Easy, boy. Daniel's hand found the dog's head. Trust me. Victoria stopped 10 feet from Margaret. Let me see the phone. Prove your people are real. Margaret laughed. You're not in a position to make demands. I'm not demanding. I'm asking. Victoria's voice was calm, steady. Show me, and I'll cooperate. Don't show me, and I'll fight. Even if I lose, I'll take time. Time for Daniel to call someone. Time for your plan to fall apart. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she shrugged and held up the phone. Victoria looked at the screen, nodded slowly. Then she moved. Her hand shot out, grabbed Margaret's wrist, and twisted. The phone went flying. Before Margaret could scream, Victoria had her in a chokehold, using her as a human shield. Tell your driver to get out of the car, Victoria shouted. Margaret struggled, gasping. You stupid! You'll never! Victoria tightened her grip. Tell him! The driver's door opened. A man emerged, hands raised. On the ground! Hands behind your head! He complied. Daniel was already out of the truck, Shadow at his heels. He kicked the driver's weapon away and zip-tied his hands in 3 seconds flat. Victoria released Margaret, shoving her to the ground. The phone, Daniel said. What's the cancel code? Margaret laughed, breathless but defiant. You think I'll tell you? You'll tell me, or Victoria will shoot you in the knee and will ask again. You wouldn't. Victoria picked up the fallen rifle and aimed at Margaret's leg. Try me. Margaret's composure cracked. 7739. Tell them, Omega. They'll stand down. Daniel grabbed the phone and dialed. His heart pounded as it rang once, twice. Status? A voice answered. Omega, stand down. Silence. Then, confirmed. Returning to base. The line went dead. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding.
Victoria kept the rifle trained on Margaret. "Now call the police, the real ones." "Who do you think you're going to call? Ashford owns half the force." "Then we'll call the state police, the FBI,
Anyone who isn't in your pocket. Victoria's eyes were cold.
It's over, Margaret. You lost."
I haven't lost anything. Margaret's voice was venomous. Do you have any idea how many judges I own? How many prosecutors? By the time this reaches trial, every piece of evidence will be compromised, every witness discredited.
Not every piece of evidence.
Victoria pulled something from her pocket, the safety deposit key. My father was smarter than you ever knew. He suspected you for months before he died. He gathered his own evidence, documents, recordings, medical records you never knew existed. All of it secured in a vault only I can access. Margaret's face went white. He left me a letter, Margaret. Told me everything. Told me what you were doing. Told me to run if anything happened to him. Victoria's voice shook with emotion. He protected me even while you were killing him. That's the difference between you and him. He loved.
You only know how to take.
Margaret lunged at her. Shadow intercepted. The German shepherd slammed into Margaret's chest, driving her to the ground, teeth inches from her throat. A deep growl vibrated through the night air. "Call him off! Call him off!" Daniel didn't move. "Give me one reason." "Because you're not a killer. You're a soldier. You have rules." I had rules. Daniel crouched beside her. "Then you threatened my family. You threatened an innocent woman. You killed a good man for money." His voice dropped to something cold and quiet. "My rules died tonight, Margaret. How about yours?" Margaret stared at him. For the first time since they'd met, genuine fear showed in her eyes. "Shadow, release." The dog stepped back, still growling, hackles raised. Daniel grabbed Margaret's arm and hauled her to her feet. "You're going to prison. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a cell, watching everything you built disappear. And when you're old and forgotten and alone, you'll remember this moment. The moment when it all ended." Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue and red lights appeared on the horizon. Margaret Chen said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The state police arrived first. 3 cruisers, lights blazing, officers spilling out with weapons drawn. They didn't know what they were walking into. Dispatch had received multiple calls about gunfire, explosions, possible hostage situation. What they found was chaos. Bodies scattered across Daniel's property. Wounded men groaning in the darkness. A bleeding Navy SEAL standing over a zip-tied woman in a designer coat. And a German shepherd that wouldn't let anyone approach without growling. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Daniel raised his good hand slowly. "I'm the homeowner, Daniel Mercer. The woman on the ground is Margaret Chen. She's wanted for murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy.
The wounded men are private military contractors she hired to kill us."
The lead officer, a sergeant named Patterson, according to his nameplate, kept his weapon trained on Daniel. "That's a lot of accusations, sir. How about you get on the ground and we sort this out?" "I'm not getting on the ground. I've been shot. I've been fighting for my life for the past 6 hours, and I'm not letting that woman out of my sight." "Sir." "Check your database." Daniel's voice was hard. Margaret Chen, wife of William Ashford, chief of police in Seattle. Raymond Chen's widow. There's a federal investigation pending. Call the FBI field office in Helena. Ask for contact with prosecutor Catherine Wells in New York. Patterson hesitated. Something in Daniel's voice, the calm authority, the specific details, gave him pause. "Johnson, run those names." One of the officers retreated to his cruiser. The radio crackled. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Victoria stood beside Daniel,
rifle still in her hands but pointed at the ground. Shadow pressed against Daniel's leg, a warm anchor in the chaos. Johnson returned, face pale. "Sarge, it checks out. There's an active federal warrant for Margaret Chen. Conspiracy to commit murder. Wire fraud. Money laundering." He swallowed. "The feds have been looking for her for 3 weeks." Patterson's weapon lowered slightly. "And Ashford?" "Warrant issued 2 hours ago. He's been removed from his position, pending investigation." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. Mark Jensen had done it. Somehow, in the midst of everything, his old commander had gotten through to the right people. "The woman on the ground is your suspect," Daniel said. "The wounded men are her accomplices. I have evidence, recordings, documents, medical records, that prove she murdered her husband Raymond Chen and attempted to murder his daughter Victoria." Patterson looked at Victoria. "You're Victoria Chen? The daughter?" "Yes." "Ma'am, there are a lot of people who've been looking for you." "I know. I've been running from most of them." 2 hours later, Daniel sat in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic stitched his shoulder wound. Shadow lay at his feet, refusing to move despite multiple attempts by various officials to separate them. Victoria was giving her statement to a federal agent who'd arrived by helicopter, a stern woman named Torres, who seemed competent and appropriately furious about everything she was hearing. "Let me get this straight," Torres said, scribbling notes. "Your stepmother poisoned your father over a period of 18 months. When you discovered evidence of this, she arranged for your car to go off a bridge. You survived, traveled on foot through wilderness for 8 days, and ended up at Mr. Mercer's property, where her private military team then attempted to kill you both." "That's correct." "And you have physical evidence to support all of this?" Victoria pulled the safety deposit key from her pocket. "This opens a vault in Helena. Inside you'll find copies of my father's medical records, toxicology reports, prescription records in Margaret's fake names, and recordings he made in the months before his death." "Recordings?" "My father suspected her. He didn't tell me because he didn't want me to worry, but he documented everything." Victoria's voice cracked. "He knew she might kill him. He wanted to make sure she didn't get away with it." Torres took the key carefully. "We'll need you to accompany us to Helena. Open the vault, verify the contents." "Of course." "And Mr. Mercer?" Daniel looked up from the ambulance. "What about me?" "I'm going to need a full statement, but from what I've seen so far, you're looking at commendations, not charges." Torres almost smiled. "It's not every day a civilian takes down 12 armed contractors and captures a federal fugitive. I'm not a civilian. I'm Navy. Former Navy. There's no such thing." The drive to Helena took 3 hours. Daniel insisted on coming despite his wound, despite the exhaustion that made his bones feel like lead. Victoria needed someone in her corner. Shadow needed to stay close, and Daniel needed to see this through. The vault was in a private security facility, the kind of place billionaires used to store things they didn't trust to banks. Victoria's retinal scan and the key opened a steel door that led to a room full of filing cabinets and safe deposit boxes. "Box 4471, Victoria said. "My father's lucky numbers." Agent Torres opened the box. Inside were stacks of documents, USB drives, and a single envelope addressed to Victoria in handwriting that made her start crying. "That's his writing. My father's." Torres handed her the envelope. "Read it later. Right now I need to verify the evidence." The next hour was a blur of legal procedure. Torres and her team cataloged everything. Medical records showing toxin levels that no natural cancer could explain. Prescriptions filled at pharmacies across 3 states. Bank statements tracing payments to shell companies that led back to Margaret's personal accounts. And the recordings. Raymond Chen's voice filled the room, weak but clear.
If you're hearing this, Victoria, it means I'm gone. And it means Margaret won. Or she thinks she did. A pause. The sound of labored breathing. I know what she's been doing. I've known for months. The doctors think I'm getting worse, but I can feel it. Something is wrong. Something beyond the cancer. Victoria clutched Daniel's hand so hard her knuckles went white. I hired a private investigator. Don't worry, I paid him in cash. Used an old contact from my business days. Margaret doesn't know. He found the prescriptions. The arsenic. Everything. Raymond coughed. I could have stopped her. Gone to the police.
But then I thought, what happens to you? She has connections everywhere. If I die fighting her, she'll claim my estate and you'll be left with nothing. Worse, she might come after you. Daniel felt Victoria shaking beside him. So I made a different choice. I let her think she's winning. I documented everything, and I'm leaving you the tools to destroy her after I'm gone. Another pause, longer this time. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. I'm sorry I brought that woman into our lives, but I need you to be strong. I need you to finish what I started. The recording ended. Victoria was sobbing silently, tears streaming down her face. He knew, she whispered. He knew the whole time. And he let her. He did it for you. Daniel's voice was gentle. He sacrificed himself so you'd have a chance. It should have been me. I should have seen it. I should have... Stop. Daniel turned her to face him. Your father made his choice. He chose to protect you. Don't dishonor that choice by blaming yourself for something you couldn't have known. Victoria looked at him through tears. How do you do it? How do you carry the weight of the people you couldn't save? Daniel thought about Kandahar, about the village, about the faces that visited him in nightmares. You don't carry it alone. That's the secret. You find people who understand, people who've been there. He glanced at Shadow. Or dogs. Victoria laughed weakly. Is that your professional advice? It's the only advice I have. Agent Torres cleared her throat. Miss Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to inform you, based on this evidence, we're moving to arrest Margaret Chen on federal charges. The case will be prosecuted in New York, outside the reach of any local corruption. What about Ashford? Already in custody. He's being questioned about his involvement in the car accident, the hit teams, everything. Torres paused. He's talking. Trying to make a deal. Will he get one? That's not my call. But between his testimony and your father's evidence, Margaret Chen is going to prison for the rest of her life. I can promise you that. Victoria closed her eyes. It's not enough. Nothing will ever be enough. No, Torres agreed. But it's justice. Sometimes that's all we get. The arraignment happened 3 days later. Daniel watched it on television from his hospital bed. The doctors had finally convinced him that a bullet wound needed more treatment than field stitches and stubbornness. Margaret Chen stood before a federal judge in an orange jumpsuit, her designer life stripped away. Her lawyers had argued for bail. The judge had laughed, actually laughed, and denied it. The defendant is charged with first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and multiple RICO violations, the judge read. Given the resources at her disposal and the clear flight risk she presents, bail is denied. The defendant will remain in federal custody pending trial. Margaret's face was stone, but Daniel could see the cracks underneath. The woman who'd thought she was untouchable was discovering just how touchable she really was. Victoria appeared beside him, somehow having slipped past the nurses. You should be resting, Daniel said. So should you. I've rested enough. 20 years of combat didn't kill me. A through and through isn't going to do it either.
Victoria sat in the chair beside his bed. Shadow, who had been lying on the floor, immediately moved to position himself between them, head resting on Daniel's mattress. "The Foundation lawyers called," Victoria said.
"What foundation?"
"Chen Global's charitable arm. My father set it up years ago. Supports veterans organizations, mental health programs, service dog training." She smiled slightly. "He would have liked you." "I would have liked him, too." "The lawyers say the estate will clear probate in about 6 months. Once it does, I'll have full control of the company and all its assets." Daniel frowned. "That's good news. Why do you sound worried?" "Because I don't want it. Any of it." Victoria's voice was heavy. "That money is the reason my father's dead. The reason Margaret came into our lives. The reason I spent 8 days running through wilderness with a knife wound. Money's just a tool, same as a gun. It's how you use it that matters." "That sounds like fortune cookie wisdom." "My grandfather said it. He was smarter than any fortune cookie." Victoria laughed, a real laugh, the first one Daniel had heard from her.
"What would you do with $4 billion?" she asked.
"Me? I'd fix my barn. Maybe get Shadow some better dog food." "Seriously?" Daniel considered the question. "I'd help people. Veterans who came home broken and didn't know how to put themselves back together. Families who lost someone and couldn't afford to grieve properly." He paused. "People like me, I guess. The ones who fall through the cracks." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about starting a foundation. A real one, not just tax shelter charity. Something that actually helps people. Your father had one." "He did, but it was his vision. I want to build something of my own." She met Daniel's eyes. "I want to honor what he started, but I want it to mean something to me, too." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet, but I keep thinking about what you said, about finding people who understand, people who've been there." She reached down and scratched Shadow's ears. "Maybe a program for service dogs, matching them with veterans who need them, training, support, ongoing care." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. "That's a good idea." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Shadow saved my life more times than I can count. Not from bullets, from myself. From the darkness that creeps in when you're alone too long." He looked at the dog. "Everyone deserves a Shadow." "Then help me build it." Daniel blinked. "What?" "Help me design the program. You know what veterans need. You know what works and what doesn't. I have the resources, but not the knowledge." Victoria's expression was earnest. "I'm not asking you to run it or move to Seattle or change your life. I'm just asking for advice. Guidance. Someone to tell me when I'm getting it wrong." "I'm not exactly consultant material." "You took on 12 armed men to protect a stranger. You put your family at risk rather than let an innocent woman die. You're exactly consultant material." Victoria paused. "Unless you'd rather go back to your mountain and pretend none of this happened." Daniel thought about his ranch. The silence that had felt like peace but was really just absence. The 47 days between conversations that he'd counted because counting was better than remembering. "I'm not good with people," he said. "Neither am I. I have nightmares. Bad ones. Sometimes I wake up and I don't know where I am." "I've been having nightmares too. Something about being buried alive in ice-cold water." Victoria shrugged. "Maybe we can compare notes." "You're serious about this?" "I'm serious about everything. It's a character flaw." Daniel looked at Shadow. The dog looked back with those steady, intelligent eyes. "What do you think, boy? Should we help the nice lady spend her billions?" Shadow's tail wagged once. "I'll take that as a yes." Daniel extended his good hand. "All right, Miss Chen. You've got yourself a consultant." Victoria shook his hand. "Call me Victoria. Miss Chen makes me sound like my stepmother." "Victoria," Daniel smiled. "And you can call me Daniel." Mr. Mercer is what people called my grandfather. Daniel, then. She stood to leave. Get some rest. The doctors say you can be discharged tomorrow. I'll have a car waiting. To go where? Wherever you want. Your ranch, Helena, Seattle, anywhere except this hospital. You've been driving the nurses crazy. I've been a model patient.
You threatened to walk out AMA 3 times yesterday.
Those were negotiations. Victoria laughed again and headed for the door. She stopped at the threshold. Daniel? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For saving my life. For believing me when no one else would. Her voice wavered. For being the person Shadow found me for. Daniel didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded. Victoria left. Shadow jumped onto the bed, against hospital rules, but Daniel had stopped caring about rules around day 2 and settled beside him. We did good, boy, Daniel murmured. The dog's tail thumped against the mattress. Yeah, we did. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Daniel wasn't there for most of it. He'd given his deposition and returned to Montana to repair the damage to his ranch. But he followed the coverage. The whole country followed the coverage. Margaret Chen's lawyers tried everything. They claimed Raymond had been suicidal. They claimed Victoria was mentally unstable. They claimed the evidence was fabricated, the recordings doctored, the witnesses coerced. None of it worked. The toxicology reports were verified by 3 independent labs. The prescription records were corroborated by pharmacy employees who remembered Margaret's fake names. The financial trails led through shell companies that traced directly back to her personal accounts. And the recordings, Raymond Chen's own voice, detailing his wife's betrayal with heartbreaking clarity. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Daniel watched the verdict on his laptop, Shadow at his feet. When the forewoman read the word guilty for the first time, something released in his chest, a tension he hadn't known he was carrying. Margaret Chen showed no emotion. She stood perfectly still as the judge thanked the jury and scheduled sentencing for the following month. But Daniel saw her hands. They were trembling. His phone buzzed. Victoria. Did you see? Her voice was thick with emotion. I saw. She's going to prison. She's actually going to prison. For the rest of her life, most likely. Victoria was crying. Daniel could hear it through the phone. The kind of crying that came from a place too deep for words. I thought, when this started, I thought she'd get away with it. She always got away with everything. She was so smart, so careful, so connected. She wasn't smarter than your father. No, she wasn't. Victoria took a shaky breath. The sentencing is in 4 weeks. Will you come? You want me there? I want someone there who understands. Someone who was part of this from the beginning. A pause. I want my friend there. Friend. Daniel turned the word over in his mind. It had been a long time since anyone had called him that. I'll be there. Thank you, Daniel. Victoria? Yes? Your father would be proud of you. What you did, how you fought. He'd be proud. Silence. Then, very quietly, I hope so. The sentencing happened on a Tuesday in October. Daniel wore civilian clothes for the first time in months. A dark suit that Mark Jensen had helped him pick out. A tie that Victoria had sent him because she insisted he'd pick something terrible on his own. Shadow waited in the car. Federal courthouses didn't allow dogs, even service dogs, and Daniel had made his peace with that. Sort of. The courtroom was packed. Media, family members of Margaret's other victims, curious spectators who wanted to witness the fall of a billionaire's widow. Victoria sat in the front row. She looked different now, stronger, more settled. 3 months of therapy and purpose had started to heal the wounds that running hadn't touched. Daniel took the seat beside her.
"Nice tie," she whispered. "Someone sent it to me. Must be a person of exceptional taste."
That's one word for it. The judge entered. Everyone rose. And then Margaret Chen was brought in, ankles shackled, prison jumpsuit hanging loose on her frame. She looked old. That was Daniel's first thought. The elegant predator he'd met on the mountainside was gone. In her place was a hollow woman who'd lost everything she'd schemed for. The judge read the charges. The victim impact statements came next, from Victoria, from relatives of a journalist who'd died investigating Margaret, from former employees who'd witnessed her cruelty. Victoria spoke last. "My father was the best man I ever knew. He built an empire from nothing. He raised me by himself after my mother died. He taught me that kindness matters more than money, that integrity is worth more than power." Her voice was steady. Daniel could see the cost of that steadiness in the white-knuckle grip she had on the podium. "Margaret Chen took him from me, slowly, painfully. She made his last months an agony of confusion and suffering, and she did it with a smile on her face. She told him she loved him while she was killing him." Margaret stared straight ahead, showing nothing. "But she didn't win. My father made sure of that. Even dying, even suffering, he protected me. He gave me the tools to expose her crimes. He trusted me to finish what he started." Victoria's voice finally broke. "And I did, Dad. I finished it." She stepped down from the podium. Daniel caught her hand as she passed, squeezed it once. The judge looked at Margaret. "Margaret Chen, you have been found guilty of crimes that shock the conscience of this court. You betrayed the trust of a dying man. You murdered him for his money. And when his daughter threatened to expose you, you attempted to have her killed as well." Margaret said nothing. "In all my years on the bench, I have rarely encountered such calculated, cold-blooded evil. You feel no remorse. You accept no responsibility. You are, in every sense of the word, a monster." Still nothing. "It is the sentence of this court that you be remanded to federal custody for the remainder of your natural life, with no possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none." The gavel fell. Margaret was led away. She didn't look back. She didn't look at Victoria or at any of the people whose lives she'd destroyed. She just walked, chains rattling, into the rest of her life. Victoria waited until the courtroom emptied. Then she turned to Daniel. "It's over." "Yeah, it is. I thought I'd feel different, happier, more complete." She shook her head. "I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now your body's catching up." "What do I do now?" "Whatever you want. You've got resources, time, and a whole life ahead of you." Daniel stood. "But first, I think you should come meet someone." "Who?" "Shadow. He's been waiting in the car this whole time. Getting impatient." Victoria smiled, the first real smile he'd seen since the sentencing began. "I could use some dog therapy." Couldn't we all? They walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was shining, unseasonably warm for October. Reporters shouted questions that Victoria ignored with practiced ease. Shadow's face appeared in the car window, tongue lolling, tail wagging furiously when he spotted them. "He missed you," Daniel said. "I missed him too." Victoria opened the door and let the dog barrel into her arms. "Hey, boy. Hey, good boy. We did it. We actually did it." Shadow licked her face enthusiastically. Daniel watched them, the billionaire's daughter and his war dog, tangled up in each other like they'd known each other for years instead of weeks. Something had changed in him. He could feel it. The silence in his head wasn't quite so loud anymore. The darkness wasn't quite so heavy. He'd spent 3 years hiding from the world, convincing himself that isolation was safety, that keeping people out was the same as keeping pain out. He'd been wrong. Shadow had found Victoria in the darkness, and in saving her, Daniel had started to save himself. It wasn't over. The healing wasn't done. There would still be nightmares, still be bad days, still be moments when the weight of everything he'd seen threatened to drag him under. But he wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. 1 year later, Daniel Mercer stood at a podium he never expected to stand behind, looking out at faces he never expected to see. The Chen Foundation's new Veterans Center was packed. 300 people had come for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Veterans, families, donors, politicians, and more reporters than Daniel was comfortable with. Shadow sat at his feet, calm and patient, the same way he'd been sitting for 9 years. The dog's muzzle had gone gray, his movements slower than they used to be. But his eyes were still sharp, still watching, still ready. Victoria was in the front row, beaming like she'd won the lottery, which, technically, she had. $4 billion worth of lottery. "Speech time," she mouthed. Daniel looked at the paper in his hands. He'd spent 3 days writing it, rewriting it, crumpling it up and starting over. Public speaking wasn't his strength. 20 years of covert operations hadn't exactly prepared him for moments like this. He set the paper aside. "I had a speech," he said, "but I'm going to skip it. Speeches are for politicians. I'm just a guy with a dog." Scattered laughter from the audience. 18 months ago, I lived alone on a mountain in Montana. I hadn't talked to another person in 47 days. I kept count because counting was easier than feeling. He paused. I thought isolation was healing. I thought keeping the world out was the same as keeping pain out. I was wrong. Shadow pressed against his leg. The familiar pressure, the familiar warmth. One night, my dog found a woman dying at my fence. I didn't want to help her. I wanted to go back inside, lock my door, and pretend I hadn't seen anything. Daniel's voice caught. But Shadow wouldn't let me. He stood there, barking, refusing to move, until I did the right thing. He looked down at the dog. That's what service dogs do. They don't let us hide. They don't let us give up. They drag us toward life, even when we're running toward death. Silence in the room. The kind of silence that meant people were listening. The woman I saved that night became my friend. Then she became something more. She had resources I couldn't imagine, and a heart bigger than her bank account. She asked me what I'd do with $4 billion. I said I'd fix my barn. More laughter. Victoria was crying now, smiling through tears. But she had a better idea. She wanted to build something that mattered, something that would help people like me, veterans who came home broken and didn't know how to put themselves back together. Daniel gestured to the building around them. This is that idea, the Shadow Project, named after the dog who started it all. We're going to match service dogs with veterans who need them. We're going to provide training, support, and ongoing care. We're going to make sure no one has to count the days between conversations because they think being alone is safer than being hurt. He stepped back from the podium. That's it. That's my speech. I told you it wouldn't be long. The applause started slowly and built to something that shook the walls. People were standing, clapping, some of them crying. Daniel didn't know what to do with any of it, so he did what he always did when life got overwhelming. He looked at Shadow. The dog's tail wagged once. Approval, pride, love. "Good boy," Daniel whispered. The reception afterward was chaos. People wanted to shake his hand, take pictures, ask questions he didn't know how to answer. Victoria ran interference, steering the most persistent ones away with the practiced ease of someone who'd grown up in the spotlight. "You did good,"
she said, when they finally found a quiet corner. I hated every second of it. I know. That's what made it good. She handed him a glass of water. Real beats polished every time. Daniel drank gratefully. Shadow had found a spot under a table, watching the crowd with professional interest. There's someone here who wants to see you, Victoria said. If it's another reporter, it's not a reporter. Daniel followed her gaze across the room. His heart stopped. Thomas Mercer stood by the entrance, looking uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit. Beside him was a boy. No, a young man now, 18 years old, the same age Daniel had been when he enlisted. Kevin. I invited them, Victoria said quietly. I hope that's okay. Daniel couldn't speak. He hadn't seen his brother in 6 years, hadn't spoken to him in 5. The distance between them had grown so wide that crossing it seemed impossible. But Thomas was here. He'd come. Go, Victoria said. I'll keep everyone busy. Daniel walked across the room. Each step felt like a mile. Thomas saw him coming and straightened, face unreadable. They stood 3 feet apart, 2 brothers who'd once been inseparable, now strangers. Tom. Danny. Silence. Kevin shifted awkwardly, looking between them. Nice speech, Thomas finally said. I hate speeches. I know. That's how I knew it was real. Thomas's jaw tightened. I should have called. After Montana, after everything that happened, I should have... You're here now. Is that enough? Daniel thought about all the years of silence, all the things they'd never said, all the hurt they'd caused each other by simply not being present. It's a start. Thomas's composure cracked. He stepped forward and pulled Daniel into a hug. Awkward, fierce, desperate. I'm sorry, Thomas whispered. I'm so sorry, Danny. I didn't know how to help you. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. And that was worse. I didn't make it easy. You didn't have to. You're my brother. I should have tried harder. They held each other for a long moment. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. A knot he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. Kevin cleared his throat. This is really awkward, the boy said. Just so you both know. Daniel laughed. A real laugh, unexpected and freeing. He released Thomas and turned to his nephew. Last time I saw you, you were being held hostage by a billionaire's hit squad. Yeah, that was pretty crazy, Kevin grinned. I've been telling everyone at college. Nobody believes me. Probably for the best. Uncle Danny? Kevin hesitated. Thanks for coming for me. For not letting them... He stopped, swallowed hard. Just thanks. Family doesn't leave family behind. The words came out automatically. Daniel hadn't meant to say them, but the moment they left his mouth, he realized they were true. They'd always been true. He just hadn't believed them before. Thomas put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Mom's birthday is next month. She's been asking about you. Says she's too old to wait for her sons to stop being idiots. She actually said that? She said worse. I cleaned it up. Daniel smiled. Tell her I'll be there. Tell her yourself. She's got a phone. Yeah, I will. Victoria appeared at his elbow. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone else who wants to meet you. Flew in from Washington specifically. Daniel turned. A man in navy dress blues was walking toward them. Tall, distinguished. The kind of bearing that came from decades of command. Admiral James Chen, Raymond Chen's older brother. Victoria's uncle. Daniel snapped to attention automatically. At ease, son. The Admiral's voice was warm but authoritative. I'm not here in official capacity. Sir, I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for my niece. Admiral Chen glanced at Victoria,
and his expression softened with unmistakable love. Raymond was my little brother. We had our differences. He went into business, I went into service, but I loved him. When I heard what Margaret did, his jaw tightened. I failed him. I should have seen it, should have protected him.
You didn't fail him, sir. She fooled everyone.
She didn't fool you.
I never met her until she was trying to kill me. Hard to fool someone when you're shooting at them.
Admiral Chen laughed, a surprised, genuine sound. Victoria told me you were direct. I see she wasn't exaggerating. I don't know any other way to be. That's rare these days. Most people wrap everything in politics and pleasantries. The Admiral extended his hand. Thank you, Commander Mercer, for saving Victoria, for bringing Raymond's killer to justice, for everything. Daniel shook his hand. I'm not a commander anymore, sir. Once a SEAL, always a SEAL. The uniform comes off. The title stays. Admiral Chen's grip was firm. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. Consider it a standing order. Understood, sir. The Admiral moved on to greet other guests. Victoria took his place. I didn't know you outranked him, she said. I don't outrank him. He's an admiral.
I mean, in his respect. He doesn't talk to many people like that.
I saved his niece. That tends to make an impression.
You did more than save me.
Victoria's hand found his.
You gave me a reason to keep fighting when I wanted to give up. You showed me that there are still good people in the world. People who do the right thing even when it costs them everything.
Daniel didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. Victoria smiled. Still not good with words? Getting better. Liar. The ceremony wound down. Guests filtered out. The reporters got their quotes and their photos and their stories. Eventually, it was just Daniel, Victoria, Shadow, and the empty building that would soon be filled with hope. Walk with me, Victoria said. They wandered through the center, their footsteps echoing on new floors. Shadow padded beside them, investigating corners, checking for threats that weren't there. This room is for one-on-one therapy sessions, Victoria explained. This one is for group work. Down the hall, we've got a training facility for the dogs. State-of-the-art. You've thought of everything. I had help. A very grumpy consultant who kept telling me my ideas were impractical. They were impractical. Some of them, anyway. That's why I kept you around. You're impossible to impress. They reached a door at the end of the hall. Victoria hesitated. There's one more room I want to show you. She opened the door. Inside was an office. Simple, functional, with a large desk and a window overlooking the mountains. This is yours, Victoria said. Daniel stared. Mine? Director of Veterans Outreach. I had a plaque made and everything. She pointed to the desk, where a brass nameplate read, Daniel Mercer, Director. It's a real job. Salary, benefits, the whole thing. You'd be in charge of designing programs, recruiting staff, making sure we actually help people instead of just throwing money at the problem. Victoria, before you say no, hear me out. She turned to face him. You're good at this. Not the speeches, not the ceremonies, but the actual work. You understand what veterans need because you've been there. You know how to talk to them, how to reach them, how to help them trust again. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. Who else has your experience? Who else has lived it? Daniel looked around the office. At the desk, the window, the nameplate with his name. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Victoria stepped closer. Daniel, you spent 20 years serving your country. Isn't it time you let your country serve you back? Isn't it time you stopped running and started building? I wasn't running. I was hiding, I know. I did the same thing.
She took his hands. But we're not hiding anymore. We found each other in the darkest moment of both our lives, and we survived. That means something. That has to mean something. Shadow padded over and sat between them, looking up with those ancient, knowing eyes. Even he thinks you should take the job, Victoria said. He thinks everyone should take every job. He's agreeable. He's smart. There's a difference. Daniel looked at the dog, at Victoria, at the office that could be his if he was brave enough to claim it. If I do this, he said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. First, I'm not wearing a tie to work. Ever. Done. Second, Shadow comes with me. Every day. No exceptions. The whole building is dog-friendly. I designed it that way. Third, Daniel hesitated. I'm not doing this alone. You have to be part of it. Not just as a donor, not just as a name on the letterhead. Actually involved. Victoria's eyes widened. You want me to work with you? I want you next to me, every step of the way. He swallowed hard. I've spent too long being alone. I don't want to be alone anymore. Victoria's face softened. Daniel Mercer, are you asking me to be your partner? In the foundation, yes. Just in the foundation? The question hung in the air. Daniel felt his heart hammering against his ribs. No, he admitted. Not just the foundation. Victoria smiled, the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen. Then yes, to all of it. She kissed him, soft, certain, full of promise. Shadow barked once, not an alert bark, not a warning bark, a happy bark. The bark of a dog who knew something good was happening. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was laughing. He approves. He has good taste. He found me, didn't he? Yeah. Daniel looked at his dog, at this woman, at the life he'd never dared to imagine. Yeah, he did. 6 months later, the Shadow Project opened its doors. The first class of veterans arrived on a Tuesday morning, 12 men and women, each carrying wounds that couldn't be seen. Daniel met them in the lobby, Shadow at his side. Welcome to the Shadow Project. My name's Daniel. This is Shadow. He's the reason any of this exists. One of the veterans, a young woman with a prosthetic leg and haunted eyes, knelt to pet the dog. He's beautiful. He's also pushy, stubborn, and convinced he's a lapdog despite weighing 70 pounds. Daniel smiled. You'll find your own match soon. A dog that's pushy and stubborn in exactly the ways you need. The program was intensive. 8 weeks of training, bonding, and therapy. By the end, each veteran would have a service dog and the skills to work with them. Daniel watched them struggle and grow. He watched walls come down and hope creep in. He watched people who'd given up start to believe again. It wasn't always smooth. Some veterans dropped out. Some dogs didn't match. Some days were harder than others. But every day, someone got a little better. Every day, a bond formed that would change a life. That was enough. That was everything. Victoria worked beside him, just like she'd promised. She learned the veterans' names, their stories, their fears. She wasn't just writing checks. She was building relationships. You're good at this, Daniel told her one evening. I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you anything. You taught me that helping people isn't about money. It's about showing up. She leaned against his shoulder. You show up every day. For them, for me, for Shadow. That's the lesson. The first graduation ceremony was small. Just the 12 veterans, their families, their new dogs. Daniel gave another speech. This time, he'd practiced. 6 months ago, you walked through those doors carrying weight you didn't think you could put down. Today, you're walking out with a partner who will help you carry it. He looked at each of them in turn. These dogs won't fix everything. They can't erase the past or heal every wound. But they'll be there. Every nightmare, every flashback, every bad day, they'll be there. That's what matters. That's what saves lives. The woman with the prosthetic leg, her name was Maria, Daniel had learned, stood with her new dog, a black lab named Phoenix. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking, "for seeing us, for believing we were worth saving." "You were always worth saving. You just needed someone to remind you." After the ceremony, Daniel found a quiet corner and sat with Shadow. The dog was slower now, his joints aching in the cold, his naps longer than his waking hours. "We're getting old, boy." Shadow's tail wagged weakly. "But we did good, didn't we? We built something that matters." The dog licked his hand once. "I'm going to lose you someday. I know that. I've known it for a while." Daniel's voice cracked. "But I want you to know, you saved me. Before Victoria, before any of this, you were the only thing keeping me alive. And I never thanked you properly." Shadow shifted, pressing closer. "Thank you. For finding me. For staying with me. For dragging me toward life when I wanted to run toward death." Daniel buried his face in the dog's fur. "I love you, boy. I love you so much." They stayed like that for a long time. A man and his dog, sharing a moment that needed no words. Victoria found them later. "Hey," she sat down beside them. "You okay?" "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how different things could have been. If Shadow hadn't found you. If I'd stayed on that mountain." "But he did find me. And you didn't stay." Victoria took his hand. "That's what matters." "I know. Daniel shook his head. "I spent so long being alone, being afraid. And now I have all this, you, the foundation, my family back. It feels like I don't deserve it." "Nobody deserves anything. Not really. Life isn't about deserving. It's about receiving." Victoria squeezed his hand. "You received a second chance. So did I. We're just trying to pass that chance along to others." "When did you get so wise?" "I've been reading fortune cookies." Daniel laughed. "That's my line." "I know. I stole it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Daniel Mercer. Grumpy silences and all." "I love you too, Victoria Chen. Impossible standards and all." Shadow barked once, not wanting to be left out. "And yes," Victoria added, "we love you too, Shadow. Most of all." The dog's tail thumped against the floor. 3 months later, Shadow died in his sleep. Daniel found him in the morning, curled on his bed, peaceful as ever. The dog who had survived 4 combat deployments, a midnight rescue, a mountain siege, and 1,000 nightmares, had finally stopped fighting. Daniel sat beside him for hours. He didn't cry. He didn't call anyone. He just sat, hand on Shadow's still warm fur, remembering. The alley in Kandahar where Shadow had found the IED. The firefight in Syria where the dog had taken a bullet meant for Daniel. The night in Montana when Shadow had refused to give up on a dying woman. So many moments. So much love. Victoria found him eventually. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, sharing the silence. "He knew," Daniel finally said. At the end, he knew it was time. "How do you know?" "Because he looked at me, last night before I went to bed. He looked at me the way he did when we were heading into combat, like he was saying goodbye." "I'm so sorry, Daniel." "Don't be. He lived a good life, a meaningful life. He saved more people than I can count." Daniel's voice broke. "He saved me." They buried Shadow on the ranch, under the oak tree where he used to watch for threats. Daniel made a marker from stone, nothing fancy, just the dog's name and the years he'd lived. But then Victoria added something else. a small plaque that read, "The first shadow, the one who started it all." "Seems right," she said. "He deserves to be remembered." He'll be remembered. Every dog we train, every veteran we help, that's his legacy. Then he'll never really be gone. Daniel touched the grave marker. No, he won't. 2 years after Shadow's death, the Shadow Project had chapters in 12 cities. Over 500 veterans had been matched with service dogs. The suicide rate among their graduates was 90% lower than the national average. Daniel didn't run the whole thing anymore. He trained others, built a team, learned to delegate. But he still spent his days at the Montana facility, working with veterans, training dogs, doing the hands-on work that gave his life meaning. Victoria had become one of the most influential philanthropists in the country. The Chen Foundation had expanded into housing, job training, mental health services. She was constantly traveling, constantly working, constantly trying to do more. But she always came home, to the ranch, to Dan. They married on a spring afternoon under the oak tree where Shadow was buried. Kevin was the best man. Thomas gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Admiral Chen walked Victoria down the aisle. "I'm not good at marriage vows," Daniel said when it was his turn to speak. "So I'll keep this simple. Victoria Chen, you walked into my life bleeding and desperate and changed everything. You showed me that isolation isn't healing. You showed me that walls that keep pain out also keep life out." He took her hands. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever be fully healed, or if you'll ever stop working 80-hour weeks, or if we'll figure out how to live together without driving each other crazy." Victoria laughed through tears. "But I know this. Whatever comes, I want to face it with you, not alone, not hiding. Together." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "So that's my vow. I'm choosing you, today and every day, for the rest of my life." Victoria kissed him before the officiant said she could. "I've been waiting for that speech for 3 years, she whispered. Was it worth the wait? Every second. That night, after the guests had gone and the ranch had grown quiet, Daniel stood on the porch where it all began. The fence where Shadow had found Victoria was still there, repaired but unchanged. Victoria joined him, wrapping a blanket around both their shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" "That night. The night everything changed." "You mean the night you became a reluctant hero?" "I mean the night my dog found a dying woman and refused to walk away." Daniel's voice was soft. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd ignored him, if I'd gone back inside and pretended I hadn't seen anything. You would have died on this mountain, alone and forgotten." "Probably." "But you didn't. You followed Shadow. You saved me, and everything after that, the foundation, the veterans we've helped, us, all of it grew from that one moment." Daniel nodded slowly. "One decision. That's all it took." "That's how it always works. One decision, one act of courage, one moment where you choose something other than fear." Victoria leaned against him. "You taught me that." "I thought Shadow taught you that." "Shadow started it. You finished it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars Daniel had watched alone for 3 years. They looked different now. Less cold. Less distant. "I got a call from the Pentagon today," he said. "Good news? They want to expand the Shadow Project to active duty military, pre-deployment bonding, post-deployment support. They're talking about funding a pilot program at Fort Bragg." "That's huge, Daniel." "I know. It's also terrifying." "Why?" "Because it means more responsibility, more visibility,
more chances to fail. Victoria turned to face him. It also means more people helped, more lives saved, more purpose. I know. That's why I said yes. You already said yes? I said I'd think about it. Then I thought about it for 30 seconds and called them back. Daniel smiled. I'm learning to say yes to things. Slowly. Very slowly. Some of us need more time than others. Victoria laughed and kissed his cheek. Come inside. It's cold out here. In a minute. I want to stay a little longer.
She nodded and went inside. Daniel remained on the porch, alone with his thoughts and his memories. He thought about Shadow, about the dog who'd found him at his worst and loved him anyway, about the bond that had carried them through war and peace and everything in between. He thought about Victoria, about the woman who'd crashed into his life, bleeding and desperate, and refused to give up, about the love they'd built from wreckage and pain and stubborn hope. He thought about the veterans he'd helped, the ones who'd arrived broken and left standing, the dogs who'd given them reasons to keep going. He thought about Thomas and Kevin, the family he'd almost lost and somehow found again. He thought about everything he'd been given, everything he'd built, everything he'd become. A sound broke the silence, soft, tentative, a whine from somewhere near the fence. Daniel's heart stopped. He walked toward the sound. His flashlight cut through the darkness until it found the source. A dog. Young, maybe 2 years old. German shepherd, tan gold and black coat. It was huddled against the fence, shivering, eyes wide with fear. No collar, no tags. Abandoned or lost. Daniel crouched down, moved slowly, spoke softly. Hey there, it's okay. You're safe now. The dog whined again, but didn't run. Daniel extended his hand. The dog sniffed it carefully. Then, slowly, pressed its head against his palm. You're okay, Daniel whispered. I've got you. He picked up the dog. It weighed almost nothing, starved and exhausted, and carried it toward the house. Victoria met him at the door. Daniel, what? Oh my God. Found him at the fence, same spot where Shadow found you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. That's not possible. I know, but here he is. They cleaned the dog, fed him, made him comfortable by the fire. He fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from whatever journey had brought him here. Daniel sat beside him, watching him breathe. What are you going to name him? Victoria asked. Daniel thought about it. About Shadow. About endings and beginnings. About the way life had a habit of giving you exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it. Hope, he said. I'm going to name him Hope. Victoria smiled through tears. That's perfect. It's what Shadow gave me. It's what we try to give every veteran who walks through our doors. It's what you gave me when I thought I had nothing left. Daniel looked at the sleeping dog, at his wife, at the life he'd built from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Hope is what keeps us going, he said. Even when everything seems impossible. Even when the darkness feels like it will never end. Hope is what drags us toward the light. He thought about the fence where it all began, the night Shadow found a dying woman and refused to walk away. One decision, one act of courage, one moment of hope. That's all it took to change everything. If you're watching this today, wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, I want you to know something. You are not alone. There is always someone who will find you in the darkness. Someone who will refuse to walk away. Someone who will drag you toward life even when you're running toward death. It might be a friend. It might be a stranger. It might be a dog who shows up at your fence on the coldest night of the year. But they're coming. They're always coming. You just have to hold on long enough for them to find you. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, no matter how deep the darkness, no matter how heavy the burden, no matter how alone you feel, hope always finds a way. It always finds a way. The end.